Historical geographer Dr. Gerg Bankoff has been working in the Philippines for some 20 years to study how natural disasters have affected communities in the country. I sat down with him and he says disasters have become a catalyst of change in Philippine society.
Certainly in the past you saw that over time an architectural style evolved that was actually adapted to not only one hazard but to multiple hazards, and we could talk about, say, buildings in Manila in the past and how they were built both against fire and against earthquake, because the two are often contradictory. You can see it in the social organization. I think that's something that is very important in various Filipino societies, cultures, is the way in which people help each other. This is commonly referred to, I think, quite erroneously as bayanihan. I think that's a kind of romanticized vision of it, but what it symbolizes, the idea of communities banding together to help each other in the face of danger, I think is very real, even if the idea has been somewhat romanticized under the Marcos years. Yeah.
Right. Now, you mentioned being resilient, and Filipinos are known to be very resilient in the face of the many, many challenges they face. Do you think this quality was perhaps brought about because of the natural disasters that we face historically?
Yes, I mean, if you look back in time, that you can see this gradual adaptation to risk. And you know, Filipinos have had to deal with risk at a time in the past when, of course, the national government, or what was the central government, really wasn't a very effective force. Or if you're going back into colonial times, where it actually didn't see itself as having a role in it. So communities were thrown back on themselves, and they organized themselves to do it, and they organized themselves very effectively. And I think in many cases you can still see that type of spirit and type of cooperation in modern day Filipino society, though it's less obvious, I think, in urban areas. Not completely gone, but less obvious. I think there's, the anonymity of modern life in the big cities has perhaps undercut that a little.
Yeah, so the smaller communities,
it's
more natural, it's easier. It's
but
easier
even in peri-urban areas around Manila, you can still see, I mean, this kind of organization, even amongst different ethnic groups who are thrown together, which is very interesting, because you'd think it would be something that was forged because of the, kinship ties and things, but actually it's been shown that actually there is enough commonality between people of different ethnicities in the Philippines to actually still share that.
Right. With the Philippines as probably the most disaster-prone area or country in the world, ideally one would like to think that we are the disaster preparedness experts.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. Why haven't we learned? Why haven't we developed into that after centuries of facing earthquakes and storms and volcanic eruptions?
Well, I think that's the million-dollar question, really. And I would argue that in the past you can see a long how shall I put it, normalization of how society has come to terms with it. Then you have a sort of hiatus or a break. And I think it's the Second World War, frankly, and the scale of the destruction that happened after that and the changes that were put in place after that, that actually you begin to see the diminishing of that kind of expertise. And I think it's very difficult to actually understand why. I mean, it could be something to do with development, modernity, or whatever it is. But I think if you're asking me in more general terms why Filipinos aren't more, what's the word? Why their skills are not more marketed internationally, I think they are, actually. I mean, but it's not done through governments. It's done mainly through NGOs. So you have a number of very important NGOs here who are very expert in dealing with hazards, and they train people all around Southeast Asia and other countries as well. So there is actually a distribution of Filipino skills, but it's done through non-government agencies more than perhaps through the government itself.
What is your assessment of how it's being handled now with the evacuees of Taal volcano?
Taal hasn't erupted ready for 50 or 60 years. So it does erupt less frequently, and I think that's a very important element in actually preparedness for both society and governments, because it's the frequency. Often it's the frequency that is the most important thing. If something happens very frequently, then there's a high public and government perception of risk. But if it's a less frequent hazard, then of course, as happens with human nature, most things fade very quickly from the public eye.
Right, so how do we balance that? You know, we have a volcano like Taal, which erupted when I wasn't even born yet, the last time. And
really? Oh, yes, I suppose, yes, absolutely, yes.
The last time it erupted, but you know that it's still an active volcano. So how do you balance being prepared with, you know,
it's very difficult. I mean, this is one of the very important questions. How do you keep preparedness? Because people, of course, something happens, everybody is conscious of it, everybody says we must prepare better. But of course, if it doesn't happen again within a number of years, then it fades away. So I think one of the ways in which you can most effectively maintain that level of preparedness is actually linking disaster preparedness with more daily emergencies. So one of the most effective ways I've seen that done at a, say, community level is, for instance, having public health associated with actually disaster preparedness. Because public health is something that happens every day. So you have the committees, you have the infrastructure set up for people's daily medical requirements, but it's also at the same time the infrastructure and the organization that can turn into a disaster committee at the drop of a hat. And that's probably the most effective way. Now, how you do that at a national scale, of course, is an entirely different matter. It's a very difficult one. But that is the big question.